Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and we're looking at Robin McKinley's Beauty, which I took out as an ebook from the library, so here you are, ebook cover. Interestingly, this is in fact the second of the two Beauty and the Beast remakes that rewrites, repackagings, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, retellings, by Robin McKinley of Beauty and the Beast. She's done two of them. And they're different. Obviously, the story is the same. It's Beauty and the Beast, so you have the rough outline that of the original fairy tale that Beauty is the youngest of a couple of daughters, that her father is a wealthy merchant who loses everything in sort of an unexpected turnabout in his business when he loses a couple of ships at sea. And then, he and his daughters sort of have to downgrade and, switch to living in relative poverty. And the father, one day when he is coming back from having gone out to check on, business that it turns out one of his ships had come back into port after all, or, roughly to that effect, that he gets lost on the way back and stumbles across the Beast's castle. And he stays overnight at the castle, and in the morning, because his youngest daughter had requested that he come back with a rose for her, sees a rose somewhere on the Beast's property and brings it, and basically takes the rose intending it to bring it to his daughter, because he figures that the person in the magical castle who was willing to feed him dinner and breakfast and let him stay in these luxurious surroundings will not miss a single flower. However, the Beast shows up and freaks out at him and says, "How dare you steal one of my roses? Your life is forfeit, or else one of your daughter's lives is forfeit." And so he is told he can go home and either come back or send his daughter, and his daughter insists on coming back instead. And, I mean, it depends slightly. There is an implication that in the original version that he may have, said, "I have 3 daughters," and the Beast said, "Fine, trade me one of your daughters," and he just did. But in both of these versions, he gets sent away and, says, "I'm not going to do it," and his daughter insists. But anyways, and then she goes and stays with the Beast, who every single evening after dinner asks her if she'll marry him. She says no. There's a brief thing when she goes home to see her family and then returns and confesses her love to Beast because he has been dying in the meantime. As a general rule, the theft of the rose, the upset of the theft of the rose is not merely that the Beast is, pissed off because somebody took something of his. If he was, that kind of obsessive about it, he would have been equally upset about somebody showing up at his home and eating his food. No, as a general rule, the metaphysical thing is that the roses, that there's, that the collective roses on the property are somehow tied to his life essence, and in effect, every time a rose dies, he loses a year of his life, or something to that effect. And so, no, he doesn't want people stealing his roses because that will literally kill him. So, it's an understandable upset, even if, he hasn't explained himself or, put a warning on it. I mean, the fact that he, in this particular case, sticks a rose in a vase on the table and then flips out because the guy was taking a rose that you had already cut off and was going to die in the vase just seems a little bit like, deliberately tempting fate like a jerk. But anyways, so both books are following the same outline. But And I will go into more detail about the other one next week because, haha, I have reread the other one for, purposes, but I can only record one video at a time. Anyway, so in Beauty, we have a much more modern sensibility. This is a book that is set in our world because, among other things, there is a point in this book where Beauty finds the Beast's library, and she starts finding all of these books with titles she's never heard of, authors she's never heard of, and the Beast tells her, well, they haven't been written yet. And these are books like Sherlock Holmes, for example, that Beauty is clearly being set at some point in the give or take, 18th, 17th century. And so a book written at the end of the 19th century is simply not going to exist yet. But the Beast's library is a magic library, and it has books that have not yet been written. So it's an interesting conceit because, of course, this does place it very solidly within our world to have books in it that are famous books but hadn't yet been written. But as I said, the sensibility in this is a relatively modern one. This is a first-person narration by Beauty, who is the youngest of the three daughters, and the three daughters were given names, in that sort of aspirational style that their mother had named them Grace, Hope, and Honor, but Honor, after her father has attempted to explain the concepts of grace and hope and honor, apparently he had some difficulty trying to make the concept of honor understandable to a 5-year-old. I heard him out, but with an expression of deepening disgust, and when he was finished, I said, I'd rather be Beauty. And thus is how she gets nicknamed Beauty. And so, in the course of this, however, she turns out her story is very much an ugly duckling story, and I mean that all the way through. That her two older sisters are very, very lovely, but as she hits her teen years, she gets bad skin, she gets, as she puts it, mousy brown hair, that, in effect, she has that problem of when you hit your teenage years and everything goes out of whack, you're growing into your own body, you're awkward, you don't entirely fit yourself, and that, it takes her several years to grow into herself, but in the meantime, she maintains this self-image of being the ugly one, of being the one that all of their governesses always said, well, at least she's smart. And had always said it in that disapproving way because, of course, what man wants his wife to be smarter than he is? Not many, that's right. As a side note, I actually honestly think that there's something to be said for not wanting your spouse to be smarter than you are, if only because a marriage is supposed to be a meeting between relative equals, and if one member of a couple is significantly smarter than the other, it makes your relationship unequal, and it will make things awkward and problematic. It's one of the things that I actually find very nice in, to leap back to another book series entirely, that when you read The Happy Valley, which is the last book of the What Katie Did series, and at the end of that, Dory and, what's her name, the sister who got brought over to take care of her, to, look after her brother in a sort of a housekeeper fashion, that she is not a very bright person. Much of the book is from her perspective, and you can see as you read this book that she isn't very bright, but Dory also, he's not quick. I mean, he's not stupid, and neither is she stupid, but they're not fast thinkers. They are slow, methodical thinkers. They're not inquisitive. They're not, sparkling wits. And they fit together very, very well precisely because they have that fundamental similarity in how they view the world, in who they are. And so, and a very striking point is made that just because two people are not sparkling wits doesn't mean that they can't find a lot to talk about together if they are similar enough and like each other well enough. And so I feel that there's something to be said for maybe a man doesn't want his wife to be significantly smarter than he is, but I'll be honest, nobody should want their spouse to be significantly smarter than they are, because then that just means that you're going to have two people who can't have a conversation. And that's just not nice for anybody. So, it's a thing. Anyways. So there is that, but they're talking about her being smart in the pitying tone of people who know that she's not pretty, and it's awfully hard to land a husband if you don't have something else. So, you get her name is Beauty, and it's throughout the bulk of the book, from her perspective, it's sort of an ironic name. It's something that she is called as almost like a dark joke to the fact that out of her three sisters, Grace, Hope, and Beauty, that she is the one who is not beautiful. And then we get to the end of the book, and it turns out that her self-image is in fact entirely wrong, and part of the problem is that she has avoided looking at herself in a mirror for ever and a day and has no idea what she actually looks like, and has grown into herself finally. But anyhow, so one of the things that I like about this is that it's a fairly straight retelling. Fractured fairy tales that upset the various tropes, the fairy tales that try to make, unexpected twists and turns or inversions of things. There's something to be said for that, of course. An old story, it's always viable to say we're going to take the old story and twist it in some way, turn it on its head, invert something, subvert expectations. But there's also something very, very nice about just telling the story, about writing it in novel form. And yes, this is a YA novel, not, an adult novel, but doing it as a YA novel where you can expand the story, where you can build it out, but you don't build it so far out that you have to add on all of the, genuinely dark implications of things, that you don't have to figure out workarounds or any of that stuff. To have it be a straight retelling, but expanded into novel form, it's nice. It's enjoyable. And, it's something that I think we need to never lose sight of, which is the fact that these old stories, they lasted so long because the story itself is enjoyable, and we should sometimes come back around to the story for its own sake, not redone for modern sensibilities, not updated, not twisted, fractured, inverted, but that story. And yes, of course, there are parts of this that are updated. There are aspects of it that would not be done the same as in the original, 18th century versions, but this is more or less a straight retelling of that story. And it's really, really nice, and it's lovely, and it has a happy ending, and what more can you ask sometimes? So, yeah, that's everything, and I will see you all next week.